And welcome back to the Fearless Podcast with your host, Kevin Jordan Campbell. Not just another Kevin Campbell, but a Kevin Jordan Campbell. Kevin, how are you?
There can be only one.
There can be only one of that. That's for dadgum sure, yes.
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm good, actually. We're at that time of the year, actually. We're recording this. It's spring in the Northeast. It's great. The weather's still very nice during the day. Very nice. We haven't hit the ugly time, so it's good, which is great because I got a lot of work to do outside. So
same up here. Spring is springing, and but the funny thing is, so I'm up in the north. You and I are about as far away from each other as we could possibly be.
Oh yeah, I know. I don't think we could be actually further away.
Actually, if you were in Florida, we could be that's probably it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that would work. Yeah.
But up here in the Northwest, this time of year, it's beautiful. But it can turn on you quickly as well. And so like June, we sometimes, so this is May, so we're not into June yet, but we refer to June as January because it can be either June or it can be January.
We still have not hit the frost-free date where I am.
We also refer to it as the sucker punch, right?
You put all those little plants in and then get pow.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of which, that fits kind of nicely into the topic today about things that are broken. Now, we're obviously not going to be talking about broken weather, but we are going to be talking about what's broken in the financial services industry. And I had to laugh when I read that title because, well, I could go on for quite some time, but this isn't my podcast.
Right. Yeah. When, for those listening, a lot of times we have people that help create the topics for us each day. And so, and sometimes Bill and I look at these just before the show.
Yes, that's right.
And we both opened this up and looked at it and we both just started laughing going, gosh, I mean, this is not supposed to be a 3-hour podcast. So we could, on this topic, we could end up going full Joe Rogan and just do an entire day.
Oh, I know. He's like, hi, welcome to the 5-hour special edition podcast of
what's broken in the financial services industry.
It's like crazy, but it's true because the financial services industry is full of a bunch of weird incentives that shape the behavior of large financial institutions, which is not a big secret. There's not that incentives in the financial world we expect, right? But some of these incentives warp everything for us, the consumer of financial services industries, and for you, for you who provide it. So why don't you start there and then let's take it from there.
This is an interesting topic because it's one that confuses many people as well, is understanding how financial advisors are compensated and how they're incentivized. So, and the world is definitely changing, and the financial services world is getting better and better in many ways, I believe. For example, it used to be, there used to be, back when people used to refer to people as brokers, right? A broker was a very transactional thing. Like you would call me, this is back in the days when you couldn't buy stocks on your own, and Bill would call Kevin up and say, hey, Kevin, I want to buy, 5 shares of Conoco or whatever, right? And I would do that for you. I would charge a fee to do that. And then after that, you're completely on your own. It was a transaction. I'm not monitoring those stocks. I'm not telling you when to sell them or anything like that. It was a transaction. You said, I want to buy X. I sold you X. I got paid. You got your stocks. I earned a little commission on it, and down the road we go, right? But I have no obligation to give you any advice or guidance on those. That's one of the big changes that's happened in the industry, is now where things are more typically much more fee-based, where you're paying a management percentage, and the financial advisor should be managing those assets and helping make decisions and monitoring things and all that. But what's interesting is there are still times in the industry where there are still things that are compensated on a transactional level, and there are some things that are compensated on a fee-based level. And the difference there is, again, a transaction is a one-time payment to like think of it as like a transaction when your realtor earns money when you sell a house, right? That's that transactional fee-based or transaction-based revenue.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, most of us these days in the advisory space, we're charging a monthly fee of assets under management, and we are incentivized to grow those assets because our fee is percentage based. The way that works is the better I am at my job and the more money I make you, the more money I make. My percentage stays the same, but the more money you make, the more money I make. The more money you lose, the more money I lose. And personally, I get really cranky when I lose money.
Yeah, so do I.
But it aligns the incentive, right? So that is some changes. But it's interesting how much confusion this creates with people because and there's also been times in history, this is also getting a little bit, is kind of going away in many ways, where if you were a financial advisor employed by company XYZ, you were incentivized by company XYZ to push their products more than other products. That is also it still exists some out there, but it's kind of also gone away. I think just because there is so much regulatory scrutiny on that.
It is interesting. And part of what you just touched on, I think, is why investors are confused because they're not sure which products are being sold as a good product because you believe they're a good product, or they're being sold because, well, you make money off selling that product.
Right, sure.
You're not building a plan for me. You're collecting fees.
So here's some other confusion in that as well. Let's expound on this. I think at least it's interesting to me. I don't know if the audience will find it interesting at all, but
yeah, I don't know. We're talking about people's money. Usually that captures their imagination. So
there's also the differences in industries. And so, for example, if you're working in an advisory role with a financial advisor, like the way we operate here at Peaks, where we're primarily, most of what we do is fee-based revenue, meaning we're being compensated in that percentage-based. The better we perform, the more money our clients make, the more money we make. Everybody's happy, right? If we don't perform well, opposite happens. So that's most of what we do here. But there are certain parts of the industry. So in some cases, it's not the advisor that picks how they're compensated. It is sometimes the solution. So for example, what I mean by that is the investment world is these days very much headed towards the fee side. But let's say that you needed a whole life insurance policy or even a term life insurance policy or something like that. And we provided that solution for you. That is the insurance world, which includes whole life insurance, term life insurance, long-term care, disability, things like that. And also we don't do like P&C, home auto, that kind of stuff here. That's not that's not what we do. But even in those, and then also those are and things like annuities, which are, kind of a pension alternative in many ways. And there's a lot of different kinds of annuities, and we can do a whole show on annuities. That's another one that can go like 5 hours.
No, that is a whole series. Yes.
Because that's another thing that confuses people a lot. There are annuities that I'm a fan of, and there are annuities that I'm not a fan of. But that world, that insurance world, primarily operates on a transactional or commission based. So it's not really that rather the advisor, and so some people will say, well, hey, if the advisor recommends an annuity, they're going to get a big upfront payment, and because that's the way it works, right? So there's a commission up front. But if the money stays in the market, you're paying an annual fee. And here's the thing is, like, I can tell you as an advisor, if I were to recommend an annuity to somebody, personally, it's because it is absolutely the best thing for them in this situation. I believe that this is what they need to solve their problem. Because even though an annuity does pay an upfront commission versus a longer trail that we make, for example, on asset management, if I have a choice between somebody putting $100,000 or $250,000 or pick the number, $1 million into an annuity versus them leaving that money in the market, personally, I would rather see them leave that money in the market, because on the annuity, I'm going to earn a one-time upfront commission and it's going to be gone. Right after that, there's no more revenue there. If it's in the market and I do a good job of growing that, I will actually make more money leaving the money in the market. But there's so many people out there that are anti-annuity. They're saying, well, they're only pushing that because they get a big commission. And it's like, well, they get more upfront money, but they're getting less long-term money. So it's kind of interesting when you look at it that way, right? At least I find it interesting. And it's like, there's just so much confusion out there.
But the confusion, I think, Kevin, comes from the complexity, a lot of the financial instruments, and I bring it up now because the annuity is a pretty good example of that, right? And in full disclosure, I part of my investments are in an annuity. So, but there's a lot of complexity. And I think a lot of people who aren't in the financial services industry, they're not in the financial services business, they want to call up Kevin and say, look, I've got X amount of money saved.
Mm-hmm.
I'm near retirement, or I plan to retire in 10 years. What do I do? And where do I go? And they don't have a sophisticated understanding of any of this stuff, so that, and the cynical person, Kevin might say that the complexity is built in on purpose, to create that confusion so that people aren't clear on where their money's going and what exactly is happening behind the scenes.
We talk about that a lot internally in our team meetings here. Is one of the things that we always really try to focus on is how simple can we make this? Because we can add layer and layer and layer of complexity into a financial plan and make it super sophisticated and very complex. But when you look at it, in some situations, I'm a huge fan of analogies. I have a client who says I should write a book of analogies. One of the things I look at is it's kind of like when you start, while I'm a huge fan of optimization, I'm also a big fan of simplicity. And you can optimize something to the point and tune something. Let's use the analogy of like an engine or something like that, like a race car engine. You can take it right to the edge. But then if you push it just a hair over where it might be just putting out the most power, the most efficiency and all that, and highest speed and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a blip, you might lose reliability. You might lose longevity out of it because you're pushing it so hard. And I think the same is true here. Is it's like we always try to think about how simple can we make this? Not how complex can we make it? How simple can we make it? Because sometimes those complexities, while they might be neat, it might be sophisticated, and you might be able to stand around at a cocktail party and talk about how, sophisticated your investment strategy is. At the end of the day, it might only just barely be beating a very much more simple concept.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, some people just don't understand. And it's like, I'm always a fan of, I think you should be able to understand what's in your financial plan. So you should be able to articulate, if you were talking to somebody who's not in the financial services, let's say you're sitting down for, with your brother over a burger or something, and you guys are talking money, you should be able to articulate to him how your financial plan is created and what piece does what. You shouldn't have to go, I don't know. My financial advisor says it's got a plan. I have no idea what it is, He showed me this thing and this charts and all this kind of stuff.
What's a simple plan look like? I mean, what is a simple plan from Kevin look like?
There's a methodology for sure, right? The things that I always look at, and it's the things that I think move the needle the most for most people, is it also depends on where you're at, right? If you're in the mass affluent, like, hey, I've got some resources, I've done a good job of saving, but I'm not. It's kind of where I break the difference between rich and wealthy. Right. And people use those kind of terms interchangeably. I kind of think of them differently, right? Rich is, hey, I've done well. I'm making good money. I've got some resources set back, but I can't just go, charter a private jet and fly to Europe for the weekend. Right. That's wealthy. The wealthy. And so the wealthy can afford to take excessive risk, and they can afford to get things more complex, and they can afford, because if you're truly wealthy, and you talk about some of the very, very wealthy people out there, if they lost 20%, 40%, 50%, some of them 90% of their money, they would still be fine. They're still obscenely wealthy. For the mass affluent, if you lose 90% of your money, you've got a significant issue, right? You're toast. So each plan part of that is, are we talking about somebody who is mass affluent, or what I would refer to as rich, versus somebody who is wealthy? And those plans are different. But let's focus mostly right now on the kind of the mass affluent. Somebody who's they've been working, They've been doing the right things. They've been saving in their 401ks. Maybe they've got some stock options. They've been saving. They're getting close to retirement. The big things that move the needle the most, in my opinion, are we've got to have a investment plan. How are we going to do the best that we can and for maximum gains and minimum risk? And that's the magic behind investing, is how do we try to get the best returns we can for the lowest amount of risk that we can. Then the second piece, so we've got the investment plan, the tax plan. How are we going to minimize taxation? Because sometimes I'll have somebody come to me and go, hey, I'd like to get an extra 1% out of my investments. And I'll look at their situation and go, how about we save you, a few $100,000 on taxes for starters? Let's look at your overall efficiency. Then we can talk about, it's great. Hey, if we can get an extra 1% or an extra 0.5% or an extra couple of percent, that's great. But how about we try to trim your tax bill down significantly? How about we look at how your money is structured and where we can make it more optimized? So second piece is the tax plan. And then the third piece is the income plan. How are we going to take, and this is something that really does perplex a lot of people. How do I take all of this money that I've created over all these years? I've saved up all this money. I've been scraping it into a pile for my whole life. How do I now turn that into an income stream in retirement that I'm not going to outlive? And a lot of people, one of the mistakes they make there is they look at like average lifespan and go, well, hey, average lifespan is, depending on what kind of study you look at, mid 70s to 80s, depending on what studies you're looking at. And so, hey, I was just working with somebody the other day. Actually, I wasn't working with them. They called in to the office and I was chatting with them on the phone, and they're in their early 70s. But the thing is, they're in their mind, they're like, well, hey, we just need, we got maybe another 10 years left or something. I'm like, what if you have another 30 left? You're 70.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just took my grandma, who's 99, to Mother's Day,
Yeah.
What if you make it to 99 or 105 or something like that? You can't think about that. Hey, I'm going to, I'm 70. So
I'm going to go in like 8 years. So I'm just going to blow through it. Right.
You could have 30 years left easy. And like, it's something we talk about a lot here because of my family. I talk about this actually in my book, Fearless. We talk about my family genetics and like we grow mold in my family. I would just talk about my 99-year-old grandma. At Thanksgiving, I took her to Texas so she could see her little sister who's 97. So I took her, as she was 98 at the time, I took my 98-year-old grandma, and on a jet from Washington to Texas, to go see her little sister. So she could have,
God bless her.
Could very well be one of the last Thanksgivings with her sister.
My wife's got
right?
the same genetics as your family. They all like late 90s. She had an aunt who we went to her birthday party when she turned 101, and she was walking around and having drinks and talking to people.
Yep. You just got to think about those things is like, hey, I could be around for a long time. So that's got to be part of the financial plan is income. And that's where we got off on this is the income side. How am I going to create an income stream that is going to last as long as I do? Some people will say, hey, I want to die broke, meaning they're like, hey, I want to spend it all. And I'm like, no, you really don't, because you never know when you're going to die.
That'd be nice if we did, but we don't.
Yeah. I had a client once who's like, I want to spend it all. I'm like, okay, just tell me what day you plan on dying and I can reverse engineer that for you. But if that day comes and you're still here, we got a problem. You're going to be broke, right? So you don't want to die. You don't want to die broke. I mean, I know it's what people say. It's like a catchy thing to say or whatever. It's like, but yeah, no, you really don't, because you don't want to outlive your resources.
No, you don't. As a matter of fact, does that lead to a lot of frustrations when you sit down with talk with people and you present them with a plan? When a client comes in and you've decided to work together, what kind of frustrations do you see from them when you start talking about their plans?
I think their biggest frustrations is a lack of clarity on where they are and how they put this together. It's so interesting to me that it's kind of the way our society has evolved is we work our entire lives for money since the day we start working, right? I don't know about you, but I started working when I was in elementary school.
Yeah, same here.
So I've worked a lot of years and we start working and we start earning but along the way, nobody really teaches us about money and we don't learn about money. And then we accumulate. And frankly, a lot of times people will come in and they're like, look, we actually feel like we're relatively blessed just by how much money we have. They're like, we never thought we'd have this much money. And they're just people who just worked and saved and did the right things, but never really understood, and in some cases, it's almost like they've built a significant amount of net worth almost by accident, right? Almost in spite of themselves in some cases, because they're like, oh, here, when we'll look at it and go, okay, hey, had you optimized this 10 years ago, if we're having this conversation 10 years ago instead of now, while you're in a great position right now and there's nothing to be upset about, you could have been in a far, far better position than you are now had you been looking at optimization along the way. So there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it's one of the things is so literally sometimes we have people come in and it's almost kind of like, they walk in with like this basket of stuff and they're kind of like, here's what I've got. What do I do with it now? And so what we'll do is, as far as what does it look like, we start massaging that into a plan and start going, okay, we're going to slice this off for income, or here's the tax plan, here's the income plan, here's the investment plan. And if you do all of those properly, then for example, if you actually put together a strong financial plan, then you can actually still afford to take some risk in retirement. Because frankly, like in this day and age, you kind of need to. We'll occasionally get people in here like they're retirement or just retired. And like I had somebody the other day who called in and they had literally almost $1 million, which was almost their entire net worth, their entire investable net worth is in CDs.
Wow.
I'm like, I understand why. And they're like, we got scared. We've got out of the markets. And now they're like, and now we think that at our age, we shouldn't be in the markets. I'm like, again, you could still have 30 years left. You can't. And the problem is while CDs have paid pretty well over the last few years for the first time in, a decade or so, they're barely keeping up with inflation, right? Because inflation during that same period of time was, it's like, hey, great. I'm getting 5% on a CD. And it's like, hey, great. Inflation was 6% last year. You lost money, you lost buying power. So when you have a plan, and it's unfortunate these days because, years ago, you could make pretty good money in relatively safe assets, CDs, savings, those kind of things actually paid pretty well. I remember one of my grandfathers, he was making 13% on CDs or something like that. Right now, it was a bad time if you were trying to buy a house.
Exactly. I was going to say there's a reverse side to that, Kevin.
If you were a borrower at that time, it was bad. But if you were a saver and an investor at that point, it was really good.
It was really good. Yeah.
Where people can make a mistake is by getting too conservative and not not making sure their money is growing and keeping up. And so you have to build a relatively strong plan with some decent defense in it in order to do that. And if you take care of the income plan, take care of the tax plan, take care of the investment plan, those things will start getting pretty well aligned in most cases.
It is interesting, and I'm going to include me in this in the sense of what we don't learn as we go along, right? And that kind of leads to this next question, which is when these people come in, your clients, they sit down with you and go, look, we got here, and we need to get there, or we're not quite sure where we need to get. What are some of the things that they should be looking for to avoid, the pitfalls that people will typically fall into? Like one you were just talking about, we needed to be out of the market. We didn't feel safe being in the market, and they've missed out a phenomenal run in the market as a result.
So let's talk about that real quick, because I think here's some interesting things I was just looking at in the last day or two. One of the things I'm hearing a lot right now is people going, well, we can't invest more right now. The market's at an all-time high.
Yeah.
Do you know how many market all-time highs we've had in the last decade?
I do not know the number, but I know it's been a lot of them. Do you know the number?
Roughly 300.
Wow.
300 all-time market highs in the last 10 years. And the thing is, if you think about it, like people go, hey, we're at all-time market high. It's too risky right now. If you look back at a chart of the stock market, it goes up.
Pretty much all the time, yeah.
All-time highs are a good thing, right?
Well, just for some perspective. Okay, I started in the early 1980s in covering in news, business and media coverage. And I remember the Dow being way down there in the hundreds.
Right.
As a matter of fact. Okay. So that it's like, and there were people then who said, be careful because the market's at an all-time high. Can you imagine if someone said, yeah, we're getting out, the Dow's like at 800, man, this is crazy stuff. We're getting out.
I remember like a decade ago, a guy was talking about Dow 50,000 and people were like, you're nuts, you're insane.
Yeah, he's a guy, he was a professor at Wharton. As a matter of fact, I remember him, yes.
And today we're at, let's see, what is it today? Right now, as of right now, Dow is at 49,651.
Yeah.
So yeah, markets are we want the markets to go up now, but what they're saying is, hey, markets are all time high. What they're really getting at, I think, is I'm scared.
Yes.
That's a fear, right? And it's a fear because they don't understand, how do I build a financial plan that has some resilience to it? And also keep in mind, there are ways these days, and it's interesting, so few people know about this. I talk about this quite a bit. I talk about it in my book. I talk about it everywhere. It's like there are investment strategies now that have some automated defenses in them. I'm not saying you have to do it all that way, but for people who are concerned about risk. So I'll give you an example, and I'm not going to talk products here because, I'm not going to make any recommendations. So I'm going to talk in generalities. So there's some investment strategies out there. There's some ticker symbols out there of funds that are, for example, when we're in bull market conditions, they'll be 100% invested in equities, right? Like pure S&P 500 or pure NASDAQ. But then when certain triggers happen, they can shift, and depending on the strategy and the concept, they might go 50% to cash or 50% to T-bills or 50% to gold or something like that, right? And then if there's some more shift, they might go 100%. Or other strategies might go instantly from 100% to zero and get very defensive. And then and these are based on metrics, and then at some points they will shift back. And so the problem is so people sometimes go, well, I've heard that you're not supposed to get out of the market. Well, it's like, there are times when it makes sense to get out of the market, but the thing is you have to know when you're going to get back in. If you're going to get out, you got to know what's going to cause you to get back in. What do you own? Why do you own it? What's going to cause you to make a change? Right. So, but there are investment strategies out there these days that have that. And does that mean they're perfect? No, they're not at all by any means. But typically the metric that I'm looking in those situations is I'm not looking for 100% right all the time. I'm looking for mostly right most of the time. And if we hit mostly right most of the time, we're going to come out pretty well, generally. So there's a lot of things out there like that now. So it's like, hey, I can't afford to take equity risk because I do have some defense in there. And it doesn't mean that we're not going to take any losses at all in a down market or a bear market, but it means that we have at least a strong chance, or at least we have a plan of how we're going to try to minimize those losses if they occur.
Yeah.
So if a market change occurs, well, it's not if, it's when a market change occurs, we have a defensive strategy in place. So we just like to talk about, hey, we've got a plan A, plan B, and a plan C, sometimes a plan D, with how to deal with this. And when you understand that, this goes back to the investment plan side. If you're doing all these things right, if you're doing the tax plan, doing the investing plan, doing the income plan, and doing all these things right, you can build a pretty strong financial plan that is going to be pretty resilient in most markets. In bull markets, you're going to do pretty well. Or I'll say potentially. In bull markets, you'll potentially do very well. I'll say that for the compliance department.
Make the lawyers happy.
make the lawyers happy, right? And then and in bear markets, at least you have, again, there's no guarantee against a loss, but at least you have a plan of, hey, what are we going to do? And the analogy, we were talking about analogies earlier. The analogy I always use is, we don't really build castles here. What we do is we help people build walls around their castles. People who've already built castles, we help them build walls. And because at some point the Huns are going to attack, right? Right. That would be the bear market here, right?
Yes, indeed.
There will be Huns, and at some point, and our job, the job of the investment plan is to try to defend the castle when the castle is under siege. And it's going to happen. That's just the way the markets work. Markets go up, the markets go down. But the thing is, markets tend to go down for relatively short periods of time, and then they start going back up again.
You can have an extended bear market. It can feel really uncomfortable for a while. Yes, indeed. But I think the point you're making is a bigger point, which is that a lot of times people don't have a really good understanding of how or what to do with the savings they've achieved. They've done well. They have the savings. They've done it all. And I think sometimes people think, oh, there are only two choices in this market. There's stocks and there's bonds, and I don't know what to do, and they're all going to go bad. And you know what you're talking about now is a financial services industry which has looked and said, no, we have a lot of different alternatives. And that's where the value of a financial advisor such as yourself really adds to the program, because you can lay out a financial plan based on them and their goals and what they want to do.
You know, this whole concept that we've been talking about, this is why we created this podcast, and the name of the podcast, Fearless Perspectives, right? And we have a video series coming out right now. It's also Fearless Perspectives. We have the book, my book Fearless, which just published, which shameless plug right here.
There you go.
Fearless, the subtitle is Creating Financial Independence in an Age of Uncertainty, written by me, Kevin Jordan Campbell. That book is published, and the whole reason, everything behind the Fearless concept, the Fearless brand, the Fearless idea is that if you do these things properly, the income plan, the tax plan, if you do these things properly, it doesn't mean that you can be foolish or be stupid or be excessively risky. But once you do these things, you can tend to be a little bit more fearless, and you can not be staring at the ceiling at night worrying about the markets, or not live in fear. That is my goal for people, is for them to go into retirement not living in fear.
An admirable goal. Yeah. And so if anybody's listening to this podcast who thinks, man, this is a guy maybe I want to talk to, how do they reach out and get a hold of you, Kevin?
Easiest way is at peaksfinancial.com. There's a contact us button there. And you can also search for other resources on Fearless. Fearlessvisionpublishing.com is where a lot of our Fearless resources are. But you're also on the Peaks Financial website. Peaksfinancials.com is probably the easiest way.
Great. If you're listening to this and you have not had a conversation with a financial advisor, I'm going to tell you a little secret here. Your first conversation's free. So if you want to call Kevin up just to see if maybe you're a fit even, give him a call. The two of you can talk and you can decide whether you want to proceed or not proceed. There's no obligation involved with this. The other thing I would ask you to do, by the way, is if you like the podcast, hit the like button and then hit the follow button. Become a subscriber, because the beauty of that is every time Kevin drops a new episode, you're notified in your email and you can give it a listen. So go out and do that right now. That's an easy thing to do. Until next time, I'm Bill Tucker on behalf of Kevin and everybody at Peaks Financial. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen today, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening to Fearless Perspectives. If you found today's conversation helpful, follow the show so that you're notified when new episodes are released. You can also visit us at www.peaksfinancial.com or call us at 360-564-1811 to learn more about our approach. And remember, being fearless doesn't mean ignoring risk. It means being prepared, informed, and confident in the plan you've built. Any opinions are those of Peaks Financial and not necessarily those of Raymond James. Expressions of opinion are as of this date and are subject to change without notice. There is no guarantee that these statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. The information contained in this report does not purport to be a complete description of the securities, markets, or developments referred to in this material. The foregoing information has been obtained from sources considered to be reliable, but we do not guarantee that it is accurate or complete. It is not a statement of all available data necessary for making an investment decision, and it does not constitute a recommendation. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Investing involves risk, and you may incur a profit or a loss regardless of strategy selected, including asset allocation and diversification. Raymond James is not affiliated with and does not endorse the opinions or services of any organizations or guest speakers mentioned herein. Investment advisory services offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors, Inc. Peaks Financial is separately owned and operated and not independently registered as an investment advisor.